Did the speech hit the right marks, and how will political parties position themselves ahead of the budget? Let's bring in our front bench. Former BC Premier Christy Clark is here. She's now a senior advisor with Bennett Jones. Marco Mendicino is former chief of staff to Prime Minister Mark Carney, as well as a former Liberal cabinet minister. CTV political analyst and former Conservative industry minister James Moore is with us. He's now a policy advisor at Edelman. And Tony Clement served in senior roles in Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper's cabinet. He's now CEO of Tony Clement International. Hi, everybody. Really nice to see you tonight. Thanks for making the time. James, I'll start with you because we were together last night watching the speech live on TV and sort of had our initial reactions. You've had a day to kind of digest it. We saw what the reaction was from the opposition today. Ultimately, what mark do you think this speech did or didn't leave?
Well, I'll give it a letter grade. I suppose it was a C. It lacked both sizzle and steak. It wasn't a bad speech, but I think it was mostly forgotten by the time most people brushed their teeth before bed last night, and nobody's talking about it today. So it was a missed opportunity. When you raise the expectation of having a primetime speech in the Eastern time zone anyway, a primetime speech where you tell people, you know, the budget's coming up, it's a watershed budget. We've been hyping up the importance of this budget, what it means for Canada, given our threats from President Trump, and here we go. And then you deliver a speech that was mostly a lot of the same stuff and not a lot of zip to it. I think it was a bit of a missed moment. There was no bad moment in the speech, but there was just no captivating moment that I think people can cling on to and repeat through social circles and say, you know, this is a really special thing. So a missed moment, but not a bad moment, but for sure a missed moment.
The opposition today in the Conservatives, Christy, have really gleaned on to the message around sacrifice in the fact that it was made at the University of Ottawa to a mostly younger audience. And you see that sort of positioning from the Conservatives that we saw a lot during the campaign, which was, you know, talking very specifically to that cohort of Canadians who feel very, you know, not able to get ahead and, you know, not that there are not jobs out there, and sort of criticizing the Prime Minister on that point specifically. Why do you think that's what they went after?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that young people a lot of them voted for the Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre, and they were hoping for, you know, something different than they got. So there's no doubt that the Conservatives would want to exploit the speech and talk about, you know, how the sacrifice, they shouldn't have to sacrifice. Well, seriously, did anybody think that Pierre Poilievre wasn't going to be cutting a lot of programs that might benefit young people? And I think that's what Carney was talking about. And James and I would disagree a little bit about this. I think it was very unusual for any prime minister to stand up there. This hasn't happened in over a decade. To stand up there and say, hey, listen, it's not all roses out there. This is going to be really tough. And there is going to be some sacrifice required. It is a very tough message for a politician to bring. But I think it was really important that he bring it, because that is exactly what we are facing after 10 years of a smothered economy, and now we're facing all the tariffs from the United States. So he has no easy task. I'm not at all surprised that he's trying to lower expectations. On the other hand, though, I would say, Vashi, he talks about jobs, and they are going to be spending like a lot of money. And you know, people can argue about that too, but the thing is, they'll be spending that money trying to create jobs by building big infrastructure. So I think he's right to disabuse people of the notion that this is all going to be easy. It isn't, but it wouldn't have been easy for any government in any case.
What do you think, Marco, is the message that the Prime Minister and the government is trying to telegraph 2 weeks out from the budget about what it is supposed to be?
That we're living in a time of great change and transition, and as a result, we are going to have to make some tough choices, but that there is a silver lining, and that silver lining is each other through our skills, our smarts, and ultimately our solidarity. And I think if there is one principle that is sort of divulged by the set of remarks, it's coming back to building one Canadian economy. I want to pick up on the 2 points that my colleagues James and Christy made. I do think that there was a moment here, and that moment was to level with Canadians broadly and more specifically with young people who have been disproportionately impacted by the turmoil in the economy in the form of higher unemployment. The number one criticism that politicians hear all the time is that there's just too much BS. And so I think that the Prime Minister was trying to cut through that and say that there is this budget that's coming up, that there will be some tough choices that need to be made, but that we are going to invest. We're going to invest by getting our energy energy to market. We're going to invest by doing some things around making housing more affordable, particularly for young people. And we're going to invest in you. And that is the scene-setting point of last night. Now, I acknowledge that you didn't get the exclamation mark and it wasn't punctuated by clear resolution. That's what the budget is about. But we are talking about it, I would say, with respect to James. And I think that that was also the point, is getting people to pay attention ahead of the budget. So I do think it was a moment, and it was a moment that was captured by the Prime Minister.
Well, I'm forcing the discussion, just to be... I'm teasing. Tony, what are your thoughts, just jumping off what Marco said? I mean, if that is what the government hoped the message was, do you think that is the message that landed for people who did watch the speech?
Well, I think we'll know where it lands on November 4th. Really, this was a setup for the budget. Not a lot. I mean, I remember that commercial, that Wendy's commercial, "Where's the beef?" You're all too young for that commercial, but I remember it. So I think we do have to see some sacrifice. What does that mean? What sort of sacrifice? Who's making the sacrifice? Investments? What sort of investments? Who is going to be in charge of those investments? And is that the private sector? Is it the public sector? A combination? These are all unanswered questions. So I think that, sure, the Prime Minister wants to speak to a wider audience in anticipation of the budget. I get that. He wants to set the table. But really, we want to see what the meal is.
I thought what was interesting today, they held a press conference, Premier Ford, pardon me, and Prime Minister Carney, James. And one of the questions from a reporter was exactly what Tony just laid out. Like, what does sacrifice actually, what is it in reference to? When you talk about sort of restraint or the operating budget, like, what are we looking at? And it was there weren't many details provided, but what I did glean from it was, it wasn't necessarily, oh, there will be programs that are cut. It's just that he intimated that programs and certain projects would not accelerate or expand to the degree he said that they would like them to. So that was the only kind of specific piece of information that was added today. What do you take from that?
Yeah, look, I like I preferred the way in which Marco articulated the dynamic in front of us, frankly, than the Prime Minister did last night, about sort of sending a flare up into the night sky and saying, there are some tough times ahead of us, but a dawn awaits. And so I think that's important. But look, the Prime Minister, he's also captured, and there's some sympathy, I think, here that's owed, right? He is still captured by the realities of a minority parliament. 6 out of the last 8 federal elections have yielded minority parliaments, which handcuffs him from making, frankly, some of the bold decisions that are necessary in order to right the ship. There was a report that came out today by the chief economist of the National Bank where they pointed out that Canada's manufacturing sector is now smaller than that of Ireland. Ireland, a country of about 5.5 million people, our manufacturing base has shrunken. And then we have the Stellantis decision, we have the Peterbilt decision. We have a lot of really challenging economic dynamics in front of us. And I think a dispassionate, substantive, and thoughtful Prime Minister just sort of saying, these are tough times. Tougher times are probably ahead. The President of the United States has clearly declared an economic war on Canada. We're trying to mitigate that the best we can, but we're going to have to work together as a government and citizens to make sure that we look out for each other and we have better days ahead, and we're doing everything we can to get that done. But the reality is, of course, in a budget is you have to make some decisions. And this minority parliament, I think, is going to create challenges for the Prime Minister that he's going to find very frustrating, that'll sort of pivot him away from having to make some of the broader, more sweeping changes that are necessary. Prime Minister Chrétien had the virtue of a clear majority parliament in 1995 to deliver that watershed budget, and he had a fractured Conservative opposition. So he had a clear runway in front of him to do a lot of things and have 2 years to recover from it politically and go into the 97 campaign. Mark Carney doesn't have that kind of room in front of him. So how he does this budget and how he politically maneuvers is going to be one of the unique and critical challenges of, frankly, maybe the last half century of Canadian politics.
Your colleagues are all nodding as you say that. Christy, I have about 30 seconds left. The last word on that to you. How big of a challenge do you think that will be?
I think Canadians are more ready for it than we think, and I think that young Canadians, we're underestimating them if we think that they don't know that this is all going to be hard. They're facing AI, powered by quantum. It's not easy for them already. I actually think that young people's expectations are lower now than they might have been, 10, 15 years ago, and he's trying to speak to that. So I've delivered a bunch of budget speeches where I've had to say, you know what, this isn't going to be all shits and giggles here, folks. This is going to be tough. And I think, in my experience of that, people understand what life is like out there. They understand how hard it is. So I think it's always hard to navigate these things, but it's necessary. And I think that the Canadians that voted for Mark Carney understood that they were doing so believing that he would do what was necessary.